Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head back to Latvia once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. Now, I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. A few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but in more recent times they've been doing some very interesting Imperial Stouts, definitely on the sweeter side of the spectrum, and they've also been doing some really nice kind of big, modern, juicy, fruity, smoothie, Nordic, whatever you want to call them, sour beers. So yeah, I need to try a few of those for you on the channel because I've only ever tried them on tap. But they are probably also the best known Latvian craft brewery across the European continent. So if you're interested in Latvian craft beer, this is probably the most accessible Latvian craft brewery to you. But the beers are pretty damn good in my experience. But the specific beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've had from this brewery before and one that I know they can do very well. And we also reviewed the original version of this beer a couple of years back. And when I saw this kind of special version of that one in one of my local shops here in Hong Kong, I just couldn't resist. You know, this is one that I was very, very keen to do a review of. So yeah, hopefully this one is as good as, if not better than the original one that I tried before. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. I'm certainly very curious to try this beer. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Eimuri, which is to the northeast of Riga, the Latvian capital, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Ārpus Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Vanilla Maple 24-month Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout. It comes in at 12% ABV, and I think from the name you can tell a lot about this beer. So yeah, big 12%, 24-month Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout. So yeah, we reviewed the original Vanilla Maple Imperial Stout from these guys a couple of years ago, and more recently we reviewed the Vanilla Maple Coffee Imperial Stout from Arpus, which was also very good. And yeah, basically that beer also inspired me to buy this one when I came across it. I think I got this beer at one of the wine rack shops here in Hong Kong, if I'm not mistaken, rather than Gerbier, which is where I get a lot of my stuff, of course. But yeah, Arpus, very, very good Latvian brewery, and probably the most accessible Latvian brewery for a lot of craft beer drinkers. So try some of the stuff if you get the chance, particularly if you're interested in hazy IPAs, fruity sours, or these kind of sweeter big Imperial Stouts. But let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Ārpus Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging systems. Just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Latvian playlist along with a number of other things, and we are adding to that playlist whenever I get the chance. But yeah, check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days. But I've heard there are a few other Latvian beers going to make their way out here to Hong Kong very soon, so we will add to that playlist fairly shortly. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Ārpus Brewing Company then. So Ārpus Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are from Latvia, and this company was founded back in 2017 by two home brewers. So this is Yurts Tihomirovs and Vladimir's Berezins. So I do apologise in advance for any bad Latvian pronunciations in this video. Very difficult language that I have very little familiarity with. But yeah, Yurts and Vladimir started off as gypsy brewers, but they were primarily based in the Riga area, and in the first year they brewed at 4 different breweries around the whole country, and they say that this helped them really understand the functionality of different kinds of brewing equipment, so it stood them in very good stead when they eventually got their own brewery up and running. But a little bit later in 2019, they received funding from the Latvian Investment and Development Agency and also from the EU, European Union Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, and they invested about €200,000 in their own brewery in Eimuri in the Adazi region to the northeast of Riga. So this new brewery helped them increase their output quite dramatically, and they apparently export about 90% of everything they produce there. And this is quite common in the Baltic countries because they're very small in population. You know, Estonia is 1.3 million, Latvia is about 2 million, and Lithuania is like 3.2 million. So breweries that are producing, 200,000 litres of beer per year, they're able to export quite a lot of it. And for us in Western Europe and Northern Europe and things, it's good because you get very good beer at quite a reasonable price, I have to say. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why everybody loves Arpus, and in addition to the fact that their beers are pretty damn good. Anyway, but they export about 90% of their beers. They're operating a 2,000 litre brew kit at their current facility, and they've got several 2,000 and 4,000 litre fermentation vessels, and they've basically been gradually upgrading the fermentation capacity of this brewery over the last few years. Like I said to you, they've made a name for themselves when it comes to the New England Hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. That's probably their primary style, if you like, but in more recent times they've been experimenting a little bit with barrels, doing some Imperial Stouts, of course, and also doing some more sour beers and things like that. I have to admit, I would love to see Ārpus Brewing try some barley wines and some West Coast IPAs and things like that. I'm not sure if they have done that, but yeah, they are a very, very good brewery in my experience, and they're very good at the styles that they've kind of specialised in. But as of April 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 85 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. As for the name of this brewery, Arpus, it apparently comes from the Latvian word that means outside of the box, and that's why they use a box as the Arpus symbol on their beers. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Ārpus Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at this beer itself. So as you can see, the can is sweating a little bit because Hong Kong is very, very warm at the moment. But I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see the Ārpus Brewing Company symbol there. It's a plain black top on the can, incidentally. This is a 440ml one, and there you can see the name of the beer at the bottom there. Vanilla Maple 24-month Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout. I can't remember what I paid for this one. I think it was about 120 or 130 Hong Kong dollars, which is about £13 sterling, maybe about 14 or 15 euros. Something like that. But in Hong Kong the salaries are pretty high, so you don't resent paying that for a beer, for an import beer, and one that's as kind of big and heavy as this, especially a bourbon barrel aged one. So I think when you think of how the distance that this beer has travelled and exactly what it is, I think 130 Hong Kong dollars isn't that bad, to be honest with you. And beer, generally speaking, beer is a bit more expensive in Asia because a lot of the ingredients are imported, basically. But yeah, 24-month bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout, vanilla, maple syrup. I don't know what's not to like about this one, but yeah, it's also got lactose in it. And I remember, a lot of these Arpus Imperial Stouts that you get tend to be very, very smooth and leaning towards the sweeter side of things. So if you like an old school Imperial milk stout, you are going to enjoy these sweeter things that Arpus are offering at the moment. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need about the beer. You've had a little look at the artwork, the lovely kind of distant lights sort of things that it's got going on. But let's get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. This is my Thursday evening beer because yeah, to get through Friday I need this one. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So that thing is black as night, look at that. Right, we've still got a little bit left in the glass, which is in the can, which is what we want, but before the head disappears, as it was very likely to, you can see that this beer poured with about 1/4 to 1/3 finger of a frothy, very dark tan head actually, but that has of course faded away to be pretty much nothing. There's just a few bubbles around the very edge of that head there, but yeah, you can see one or two bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones just going up toward the surface of the liquid there, but overall it looks pretty nice actually. I think this beer looks really good. So yeah, in terms of the colour of this beer, it looks absolutely great. You can see this one is pretty much as black as the can that it comes in. This is lovely, very dark ebony rosewood colour. Even if we shine the light through this beer, it's only got a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it. But yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use, that's going to go a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelize, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or any adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But yeah, when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts and Porters and stuff, the barrel isn't really going to have all that much effect, to be quite honest with you. A couple of the ways you can play around with Imperial Stouts, of course, you can either do a longer wort boil to give you more leathery, complex aromas and flavours and things, or you can do double mash, which is probably the more common one, to be honest with you. And I think Arpus do double mash with quite a few of these stouts, but I couldn't tell you for sure. But just looking at the way this one kind of behaves on the glass and the kind of lacing that it leaves on the edge of the glass, yeah, I think this beer probably is very likely double mash. But it does also contain lactose as well, so that could be partially responsible. But yeah, in terms of appearance and what you would expect from an Imperial Stout, nothing overly surprising about this one. So yeah, I think we can leave the appearance section there, and we can go on and actually have a little look at the aroma of this beer then. I'm very curious about this. Oh yeah, I'm going to say straight away, there's nothing surprising about this beer in terms of what you get, but it just smells beautiful. Wouldn't expect anything less from Arpus. These guys are a seriously good quality brewery, but yeah, this beer is this is going to be something pretty special actually. The original one was great, but the bourbon barrel aging, it's this is great. You know, it reminds me actually of the one from Stigbergets that had the lion on it. I think it was just called Big Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout. I'm sure that's what the name of that beer was. This beer really reminds me of that actually. It's almost quite straightforward and really unwavering in terms of what you would expect, but it just does it beautifully. Yeah, aroma wise this is great. One of the things that we should point out about barrel aging is that if you barrel age an Imperial Stout like this, you're always going to sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel just to get those more kind of infused flavours out of the beer. And so I'm really curious to see how that plays out in this one, because the original was a big, thick, oily, smooth thing. But yeah, I've got a feeling this beer will be pretty damn awesome actually. But it gives you everything you'd want. You can smell the big kind of oaky woodiness in there. You've got the bourbon, you've got a lot of chocolate, you've got the vanilla, the maple, you've got all of these sorts of things. It's just a big, big sweet beer, this one. So let's try and break down the aroma of this a little bit more before we actually taste the beer and describe it for you a little bit more in depth. But this is going to be a real pleasure just to sit and sip over the next couple of hours. Yeah. So the backbone of this beer, it's got that lovely American oak to it. You've got a lovely smoothness to it. As I say, I've said in many reviews, the American oak is quite different from the European oak. The European oak has a bit more dryness to it and just a bit more brightness, I would say. But the American oak just almost smells that little bit sweeter. Within the oaky layer, you do get that little bit of vanilla, which is very common in barrel aged beers. But yeah, the bourbon comes out of this one pretty obviously. I'd be very curious to know exactly what bourbon barrel they've used, because a lot of breweries just say bourbon barrel. They don't, quite often if they use Scotch whisky barrels, they say specifically what Scotch, if it's Bowmore or Lafroig or whatever. But yeah, the bourbon, they don't often say that. Yeah, the aroma that comes out of this though is incredible. So yeah, lovely smooth oaky notes in there, a wee bit of vanilla in the wood, and the big, big bourbon sugars. It's awesome. It really is great. On top of that then, you start to get some big, like, I would say, like, sort of chocolate brownie characters out this one. It's like a really highly caramelized chocolate brownie type character that you get in there. And the maple syrup in this one is really, really obvious. It's just so sticky, and it's like a maple syrup coated chocolate brownie that you get out of this one. So the big, massive chocolate brownie, good little bit of dark, oily chocolate. But the chocolate in this one, you know, there's a whole spectrum of chocolate in this particular beer. I would say, yeah, you've got a whole spectrum of that in there. So there is you can smell like a little bit of darker chocolate, but it really is more milky because of the presence of the vanilla. But the brown sugars in this are just crazy. You've got that big maple syrupy note in there. You've got a lot of treacle and molasses. You do get an almost fudgy note out of this one as well, like a vanilla kind of fudge. There's little elements of nuttiness as well, like, no, I wouldn't say pecans. Pecans are a bit dry, but yeah, there is a wee bit of an almost nutty character to this one mixed in with all the chocolate. But a lot of milk chocolate, a lot of kind of darker chocolate as well. But yeah, the way that all of that kind of pieces together, I think, is really, really nice in this one. Yeah, aroma wise, this beer is just incredible on the malty side of things. Yeah, fudge, treacle, molasses. I would say as well, this beer doesn't smell as if it's had a particularly long wort boil. The brown sugars are a bit too rounded. They're not leathery and dry enough in that sense. But yeah, really treacle, molasses, sweet caramel, fudge, a lot of chocolate, mainly milky chocolate, and then that big sort of chocolate cakey, chocolate brownie type note coming out of this one. There's not a lot to report in terms of hoppiness with this beer, and I mean, Imperial Stouts are not the most hop forward of beer styles anyway, but there's a very slight grassiness to it, very slight earthiness, but yeah, very, very minimal. And that's probably just because of how sweet the beer is. But yeah, in terms of the balance between the sweetness and the barrel of this one, those very, very much go hand in hand, and it is pretty much in keeping with what we've had from Arpus Brewery before. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the fruitiness of this beer just to round off the aroma section of this one. But yeah, this is so thick and so brown sugary. This is going to be just a sipper over maybe 2 or 3 hours or something like that. Crazy, crazy beer. But on the fruity side of things, yeah, it's kind of what you'd expect. It's not really sharp and raisiny. It's not even got the kind of juicy plum notes to it for me. It's a lot of like, there's a lot of black currant and maybe like an oily figgy character that comes out of this one. Yeah, black currants, figs. There's maybe a little bit of an almost drier, datey, pruny type character in the background. But yeah, yeah, I would stick with that. Black currants, datey notes, prunes, and then yeah, just the way everything goes together in that one is absolutely beautiful. It gets a big thumbs up from me. I really like this. I do think this is a pretty damn awesome smelling beer, this one. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But yeah, this one is pretty damn special. If you like the kind of old school Omnipollo ones, you are most definitely going to enjoy this particular beer. So yeah, let me just make sure we don't waste any of that. But yeah, this is the Vanilla Maple 24-month Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout from Ārpus Brewing Company in Eimuri, Adagi, northeast of Riga in Latvia. Let's get stuck in. 12% Imperial Stout, this one. Slanja, skål, cheers, or as they say in Latvian, prieka. Yeah, that's pretty damn good, I have to say. I will admit, that maybe, I think with the Arpus Stouts, maybe I prefer the non-barrel aged ones, just very slightly. But this really is damn good. This might grow on me the more that I drink of it. But yeah, this is really, really well done. I wouldn't expect anything less of this brewery. These guys have got their reputation. They've earned their reputation. They've got it for a reason. And this beer is no exception to that. It's a very well done bourbon barrel aged beer. I will say that. I do wonder if this one might have suited rum barrel aging a little bit better, in honesty, or it's maybe not fruity enough for cognac barrel aging. But I wonder, yeah, maybe rum barrel aging might have just suited the vanilla maple thing a little bit more. But the bourbon side of things is pretty nice, and I think this is maybe one of the first bourbon barrel aged beer. This is at least one of the first bourbon barrel aged beers I think I've seen from these guys. Don't know if it's one of the first ones they've released, but certainly I can see why they would go for bourbon barrel aging first. It's a kind of safe option almost, and it works. But yeah, I do think maybe bourbon barrel aging, for me, yeah, it's an interesting point. I think some of the beers don't need it. Some of them can work out very well with it. This does work out very, very well, but I would also maybe say the original beer is good enough that it didn't need it. So wee bit of a kind of catch-22 with this beer almost, but this is great. This really is very, very nice. So yeah, it's a big, big thumbs up from me. Absolutely, this is a beer that you're either going to share or you're going to sip over a couple of hours, but it gives you everything you would expect from a kind of sweeter leaning Imperial Stout, that's for sure. But it's a big, syrupy, oily beast of a beer, this one. Yeah, so let's just break this beer down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So the middle third of your palate, then, you can feel that the backbone of this beer is obviously that nice kind of smooth, oaky, American wood in there. And as you move further forward in the base of that middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of vanilla out of this one. But what I would say is that whatever bourbon barrel they've used in this one, it's actually quite strong, because you can feel the spirit layer really lingering there into the aftertaste with this one. But that might just be the length of time that this one's been in the barrel, because I think most barrel aged beers are like 10 to 12 months, but 24 months is pretty long actually. And that's one of the things that maybe this one at 24 months, that's probably why this beer feels almost so syrupy in a sense. It really has this kind of syrupy stickiness to the mouthfeel. And one of the things is, when you barrel age beers, you're always going to sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel to give you these infused flavours. So 24 months is going to have quite the effect on this one, and you can really feel that in here. This is really more syrupy and oily than a number of barrel aged Imperial Stouts that I've had over the years. But it still works out very well. So yeah, the bourbon layer that sits above the wood there is really sticky and really oily. But above that, you do get this chocolate brownie. Yeah, you get this kind of chocolate brownie, like really sticky chocolate brownie. It actually reminds me of some of the vegan chocolate brownies that I had from some of my vegan friends actually, which were really good, but the stickiness of those things was unreal. Really reminds me of that. So you've got this kind of, above the base of the beer, you maybe have like a little bit of an almost rye bready bread crust sitting above the bourbon layer, but then yeah, you've got this really like sticky chocolate brownie type layer above that. And at the back of that middle third of your palate, it's like a dark chocolate, 70-80% cocoa, but as you move further forward, it mellows out to be more of a 50% cocoa. Remember, generally speaking, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. So yeah, you've got this really dense, like sort of chocolate brownie kind of layer. Then above that, you get more of the kind of drier chocolate. Like at the back of that, you get a wee bit more of an almost cocoa powdery chocolate, which is interesting. A wee bit of almost toasty charred chocolate as well, so you can feel that. Then as you move further forward, the cocoa, the kind of cocoa powder type layer in this one becomes a more it becomes a little bit more kind of milky almost. So within that kind of dense chocolate brownie layer, you can feel there's a little bit more vanilla in there, and then I think on top of the chocolate, that's when you really get the kind of maple syrupy side of this beer. So yeah, the maple syrupy type of this beer is, or the maple syrupy side of this beer rather, that sits above that kind of drier chocolatey note for sure. So the maple syrup's the base there, but then above that, it's quite interesting because above the more oily maple syrup, you have this layer of leathery kind of brown sugar. And for me, when you get leathery brown sugars, usually that's a sign of a slightly longer wort boil. So yeah, that's not something I remember from other Arpus beers. But yeah, the brown sugars are very layered. So you've got the oily maple, the oily kind of sticky maple syrup sitting above the chocolate. Then you have this leathery brown sugary layer, and in the dead center of your palate you can feel this really kind of concentrated treacle molasses. As you move out from that, you get a little bit of this kind of dry vanilla fudgy character, and then maybe a little bit of Werther's Original butter candy butterscotch, and then yeah, you've got the leathery note that I was just talking about. So yeah, the way all of that pieces together in this one is really quite interesting. You do get a little bit of nuttiness out of the cakey layer. You do get a little bit of nuttiness out of this as well. So yeah, just the way everything kind of pieces together in this beer, I think is really interesting. But the majority of the complexity of this one is sitting in that middle third of your palate actually. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that. So on the back third of your palate then, so the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. So there's a wee bit of like a rye bready, brown bready thing in the base, but then yeah, you get that almost kind of chocolate brownie type note. It's more like a chocolate muffin actually in that border region. You more get that in there, but then yeah, the base of that back third of your palate, you can feel that the bourbon wood, the barrel wood is just that little bit drier. You've got the bourbon layer in there, which feels a little bit drier too. But then yeah, you have more on that back third of the palate, the kind of, you know, chocolate brownie note that I was picking up. It's more like a kind of drier muffin in there, but maybe there's a rye bready layer in the base too, which was a little bit lighter, taller and more airy. But then yeah, the chocolate muffin layer sits above that, and then above everything else you can feel that the kind of maple syrup dries out, and then some of the leathery brown sugars as well, they just creep over the top of that malty side of the back third of the palate. I always get the yeasty side of the beer on the back third of the palate, of course, and then I can feel little bits of the yeastiness just coming out in this one too. So let's look at those yeasty characters on the top of that back third of the palate. So yeah, the yeasty side of this beer, it's like a very sweet, I would say it's like a very sweet, kind of concentrated brown rye bread, like a German pumpernickel in the middle. And as you move out from that, it's kind of like a almost like brandy soaked rye bread or something. Or like a brandy soaked German pumpernickel, and then you've got like a rye bread crust around the edge. So yeah, dense, sweet, oily rye bread in the middle, a more brandy soaked pumpernickel around the edge, and then this kind of rye bready bread crust. But as I say, all of that sits on top of the back third of the palate, above the kind of leathery brown sugars, the maple syrup, then the cake and the sort of muffiny and rye bready characters. But definitely, yeah, that back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. Yeah, really interesting stuff this, and I can feel the booze going to my head a little bit with this one. So yeah, hopefully I stay concise with this. But anyway, let's round it off with the hoppy character. So yeah, like I said earlier, the hoppy characters, there's not too much to report with this one. There's a wee bit of smooth earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal characters. You move further forward along the sides of the palate, you get a little hint of a slightly floral sort of thing. This beer, of course, has been in the barrel for 24 months, so a lot of the hoppy character has dropped out of it, and that's what makes the beer very smooth. But yeah, round the front curve of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of lighter, grassy sort of thing coming out of this one, which is great. But yeah, on the front third of your palate, then for me, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of rye bread in the base, then that more chocolatey muffin character on top. The base of the front third of your palate, you've got the smooth bourbon wood, you can feel it's a bit sweeter there. You've got the bourbon spirit layer, then yeah, rye bready character, almost, and then yeah, that kind of, you say the sort of vegan chocolate brownie type thing above it, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll the way out of the beer. So, pardon me, let's look at that juicy fruity ester that rolls out of this one. So yeah, one thing I will say about this beer is that the fruity characters are a lot sharper and sweeter in the flavour than they were in the aroma. So yeah, if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit of raisiny sharpness on the top, definitely a lot of juicy plum, but underneath that you get the prune, you get the date, and all of this, and you can feel the bourbon just pushing its way up through there as well, and it gives the beer an almost like slightly sherry or cognac-y type character into the aftertaste almost. Mixes in with those nutty characters as well. So yeah, raisin, plum, as I say, prune, date, sultanas almost as well. And yeah, as you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, big oily fig, and then into the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's more of like a black, more of a black currant underneath, and a black berry sitting on top of that. But the blackberry isn't too sharp, it's more the currants that linger into the aftertaste, and the sort of dates and prunes and stuff like that, and the sultanas as well. Those are the flavours that really linger into the aftertaste because they mix with the maple syrup and the kind of bourbony characteristics coming out of this beer. So yeah, the way that all of this goes together is really, really nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, this is an awesome beer, this one. I do wonder, it didn't really need the bourbon barrel aging in my opinion if I think about the original one, but it adds an extra depth to the beer almost. I would be very curious about this one with rum barrel aging as well, in all honesty. But yeah, if you like a sort of old school, sort of unsurprising but very, very well done sweet Imperial Stout, then you will enjoy this one. So yeah, it's great. But let's round off the review with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel then. So let's do that. For me, yeah, it's full-bodied, mid-range full-bodied. Because it's barrel aged, it's not as thick as some of the other things you'll come across from Arpus, of course, or generally speaking. But yeah, carbonation on this one is very, very smooth. It has a sort of silky mouthfeel to it, but very, very oily in a sense as well. It covers its alcohol very well as well, for sure. In terms of the IBU of this one, very, very low. It's probably like, 15 IBUs at the absolute most, but it does have a wee bit of dryness to it, in fairness, and a wee bit of toastiness that you'll get. But the malt base, you've got the woody character underneath, which is very smooth, the spirit layer, which is almost quite sticky, the kind of sticky and dry sweet cakey characters, the big oily and dry brown sugars in it as well. Then you've got a wee bit of sharper fruity character when you first take it in, and it becomes more oily and dry into the aftertaste too. Really not much in the way of hoppy character to this one, but that's kind of to be expected. But all in all, really interesting beer, this one, and I certainly would recommend that you try this one. And if you're not the biggest fan of sweeter Imperial Stouts, then I think this bourbon barrel aged version is a bit sweeter than the original, so maybe you want to try the original instead. But yeah, in any case, Arpus are a brewery that you definitely want to check out. And I've enjoyed this one, so I'm going to go away and sip on this for the next couple of hours. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This was the Vanilla Maple 24-month Bourbon Barrel Aged Imperial Stout, a 12% monster from the wonderful Ārpus Brewing Company in Eimuri, Adagi, near Riga in Latvia. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Ārpus Brewing Company as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the near future. Until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao just now.